Hey everyone! Welcome back to Speak English Daily. I'm Emma, and I am really glad you decided to spend some time with me today. So, this episode is a little different from our usual ones. Today, I'm going to tell you a story, a long one. It's a personal story about a year in my life when everything fell apart, and I had to figure out how to put it back together. And while I tell this story, I want you to shadow me. Now, if you're new here, shadowing is what we do on this channel. It's simple. You listen to me speak, then you repeat what I said out loud in your own voice right after me. You copy my rhythm. You copy where I pause. You copy the way a sentence rises and falls. You're not translating in your head. You're just following me like a shadow. Here's the thing about shadowing that most people don't realize. When you repeat out loud, your brain starts to store those patterns. The way real English sounds, the way sentences connect, the way we stress certain words and let others go soft. That's not something you can get from a textbook. You can only get it by doing it. So that's our job today. I'll tell the story. Along the way, I'll pause and we'll shadow together. I'll also explain new words, but naturally, the way you'd explain something to a friend. Not like a dictionary. Ready? Okay, here we go. This is the story of the year everything changed. It started with a text message. I remember the exact moment. It was a Monday morning in September. I was sitting at my kitchen table. I had my coffee. It was still hot, which never happens. I'm always letting my coffee get cold. The morning light was coming through the window, and I remember thinking, okay, this is a good day. I had that feeling, and then my phone lit up. It was a message from my boss. It said, "Hey, Emma, can you come in a little early today? I want to chat before the team meeting." I read it twice, and I felt it, that thing in your stomach when something is off. You know that feeling? You don't know why, but something just doesn't feel right. Your gut is telling you something. Your gut? That's a phrase we use in American English. It means your instinct, your inner feeling. When I say my gut told me something was wrong, I mean I had a strong feeling, even without any real reason. So, my gut was telling me something, but I pushed it away. I finished my coffee, grabbed my bag, and headed to work. I got there 20 minutes early. My boss, Sarah, was already in her office. She had the door open. She smiled when she saw me, but it was the kind of smile where the eyes don't really join in. She asked me to sit down. She told me the company had lost a major account. A major account, that means a really big client, a company that's paying you a lot of money. And without that account, they had to make cuts. To make cuts means to reduce costs, and usually that means letting people go. Letting people go is a softer way of saying firing someone or ending someone's job. She said, "Emma, I have to let you go." 6 words. And just like that, everything changed. I sat very still. I think I nodded. I said something like, "Okay, I understand." But I wasn't really there anymore. It was like part of me had stepped outside the room and was watching from a distance. She handed me an envelope. She thanked me for my work. She said she was sorry. And then, I don't really remember walking out. I just remember standing on the sidewalk outside the building, holding the envelope, and the sun was shining, and people were walking past me like nothing had happened. And I thought, what just happened? She asked me to sit down. She told me the company had lost a major account. Without that account, they had to make cuts. And she said, I have to let you go. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The idea of going back to my apartment, closing the door, and sitting alone with all of that, I just wasn't ready for it. So I walked. I lived in a city, still do. And one of the things I love about cities is that you can just walk and nobody looks at you twice. You can be completely lost in your own head and you're just another person on the street. I walked for maybe an hour. I didn't really know where I was going. I went past the coffee shop I went to every Saturday. I went past the bookstore I always said I'd spend more time in. I went past the park where I ran sometimes in the mornings, back when I still ran in the mornings. Eventually, I ended up by the river. There's a path along the river near where I live. It's one of those places where people walk their dogs in the morning, and old men sit on benches and read newspapers, and little kids chase pigeons. I found an empty bench, and I sat down. The water was moving slowly. It was gray-green. A couple of ducks were drifting along, not going anywhere in particular, just floating. And I sat there and I watched them, and I didn't think about anything for a while. Sometimes you just need that. You need to stop processing and just sit. Just breathe. After a while, my brain started to come back online, and the first thing it did, the very first thing, was give me a long list of everything that was wrong. No job, bills. What do I tell people? What do I do next? How long can I afford to keep my apartment? You know how that goes, right? The brain just starts listing, and the list gets longer and longer, and your chest gets tighter and tighter. And then something happened, something I didn't expect. Underneath all of that, underneath the fear and the stress and the questions, I found something else. It was quiet, and I almost missed it. It was relief. Relief. That feeling when something difficult finally ends. And even though it hurt, part of you is glad it's over. Like when you finally finish a really hard conversation you've been avoiding. There's the difficulty, yes, but also, okay, it's done. Because honestly, I hadn't been happy in that job for a long time. I'd been showing up, I'd been doing the work, but that feeling of actually caring, of being excited to go in, that had been gone for a while. I sat with that for a minute. The ducks kept floating, the river kept moving, and I said out loud, quietly, to nobody, so, what now? I was still sitting there, staring at the water, when someone sat down next to me. She was older, maybe in her late 60s or early 70s. She had white hair, and she was wearing this bright orange jacket. The kind of jacket that says, I don't care what anyone thinks. I like this jacket. She had a small paper bag on her lap, and she was pulling out pieces of a bagel and tossing them to the ducks. We sat quietly for a minute or two. Then she looked at me and said, "Rough day?" I laughed, a small, tired laugh. Is it that obvious? You've been staring at those ducks for 20 minutes, she said, and you don't have any bread. That made me laugh a little more, a real laugh. Her name was Carol. She told me she came to this bench almost every morning. Retired now, she used to teach high school English for 35 years. 35 years. I told her I had just lost my job, and she nodded like she completely understood. And she didn't say, "Oh no, that's terrible," the way most people do. She just nodded. Then she said, "My husband lost his job once. This was years ago. He was devastated. Devastated. That means deeply hurt, really broken up about something. He sat around the house for 2 weeks, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a problem." She smiled. And then something clicks for him, and he started a whole new chapter. And honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened to us. I asked what happened, what he did. She said, he started teaching community classes, adults learning to read. She looked at the ducks. He said it was the first time he felt like his work actually mattered. Something about that landed on me. The first time his work actually mattered. I didn't say anything, but I kept those words. She finished the last of her bagel, crumpled up the bag, and stood up. "Give yourself a few days," she said. "Feel bad about it. You're allowed to. And then figure out what you actually want. Not what makes sense on paper. What you actually want." She walked away. The orange jacket was bright against all the gray of the morning. I looked at the ducks. One of them looked back at me. What do I actually want? That night, I went to Target. I know. When life falls apart, go to Target. Very American of me. But I needed a notebook. One of those simple ones with a plain cover. I found one in dark green. Paid $3 for it. I went home, made some pasta, and sat at my kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me. I wrote at the top of the first page, "What do I actually want?" And then I sat there for a really long time, because that question is harder to answer than it sounds. We spend so much of our life doing what makes sense, what pays the bills, what other people expect, and we forget to ask what we actually want. I started writing, not a plan, just things I knew about myself. I like working with people, real conversations, helping people figure something out. I like explaining things. I was always the person at work who explained the complicated stuff in a way that made sense. I kind of loved doing that. I want to feel like what I do matters. Like at the end of the day, something was a little better because I was there. I looked at what I'd written, and something started to form. Not a plan yet, just a shape, a direction. My cousin had been taking English classes for the past year. She'd moved here from Mexico, and her English was improving so fast. And she always talked about how much her teacher meant to her, how patient she was, how she made her feel like she could actually do it. I thought about that. I picked up my pen and wrote one word on a new page: teaching. I stared at it, and instead of feeling scared, which I expected, I felt curious. Curious means wanting to know more, wanting to find out. Like when you see a door that's slightly open and you want to look inside. That was new. For the first time all day, I felt curious instead of scared. I closed the notebook, washed my dishes, and went to bed. And the next morning, I started researching. I spent 2 days on my laptop, going down a rabbit hole. Going down a rabbit hole, that's an expression we use when you start looking something up and then one thing leads to another and another, and suddenly 3 hours have passed. Like falling into a hole and going deeper and deeper. I looked at TEFL programs, community teaching certifications, adult education courses. Some were really expensive. Some required you to already be a teacher. But I found one, a 10-week certificate program at a community college nearby. It was designed for people who had no teaching experience but wanted to teach English to adult learners. Weekend classes, totally doable. I read every word on that page. I read the reviews. I looked up the instructor's name and read about her background. And then I closed my laptop. And then I opened it again. I did that 3 times. Open. Read everything again. Close. Because some part of me kept saying, "You're not qualified for this. You've never done this before. What if you're bad at it?" You know that voice, right? That voice in your head that tries to talk you out of things before you even try. I think we all have that voice. Some people call it self-doubt. Self-doubt means not believing in yourself, questioning whether you can do something. I sat with this self-doubt for a minute, and then I thought about Terrell on the bench. What do you actually want? I clicked enroll. My hands were shaking a little when I pressed confirm, but I pressed it. And then I just sat there in my apartment, in the quiet, thinking, okay, I just did that. It felt terrifying. It felt exciting. It felt both of those things at exactly the same time. The first day of the program was a Saturday in October. I got there early. I always get somewhere early when I'm nervous, because the idea of walking in late when I'm already anxious is too much for me to handle. So I was sitting in the classroom 10 minutes before anyone else arrived. The room slowly filled up. There were 9 of us total. A woman in her 40s who had been a nurse and wanted a change. A guy around my age who had been tutoring on the side and wanted to make it official. A retired military officer. A young woman fresh out of college, and a few others. All different backgrounds. All here for the same reason. Something had shifted in their life, and they were trying to figure out the next step. Our instructor walked in right at 9 o'clock. Her name was Dr. Keating. She was in her 50s, small, with this very calm energy, the kind of person who you know is completely in control without them having to say anything loud. She put her bag down, and she looked around the room, and she said, "I want to start by asking you all one question, and I want you to answer honestly. Why are you here?" One by one, people shared. "I want to make a difference. I love language. I needed something new. I wasn't sure what else to do." When it got to me, I said, "I lost my job 2 months ago. And the one thing that kept coming back to me, the thing that felt right, was teaching. So I'm here to find out if I'm right about that." Dr. Keating looked at me for a second. Then she said, "That's honest. Good. Honest is a good place to start. The program was hard. I want to be clear about that, because sometimes people think, oh, teaching, how hard can it be? But there's a big difference between knowing something and being able to teach it. Knowing something means it's in your head. Teaching it means you can take it out of your head and put it into someone else's head in a way they understand. That's a completely different skill. I had to learn how to write a lesson plan. A lesson plan is basically a map of what you're going to teach and how you're going to teach it. I had to learn how to give instructions without making them complicated. I had to learn how to correct someone's mistake in a way that didn't make them feel embarrassed or shut down. And I made a lot of mistakes in those 10 weeks. A lot. Dr. Keating would say, kindly but clearly, too complicated. Simplify, or you lost them at step 2. Go back, and I'd try again. But I started getting it. Slowly, I started getting it. And when something clicked, when I could see in someone's face that they understood, it felt like nothing I had felt at any other job. I finished the program on a December Saturday. Dr. Keating handed me my certificate. She shook my hand and said, "Go find your students." I drove home with the certificate on the passenger seat. 3 months later, I was standing in front of a classroom for the first time. It was a Tuesday evening in March. The room was in a community center. A community center is a public building where people in the neighborhood can take classes, join programs, do activities. This one was a little old, and the lights were too bright, and there was a vending machine in the hallway that made a humming noise the whole time. Not glamorous. Glamorous means beautiful, impressive, exciting. This was not that. But the people who walked through that door, they were incredible. There were 8 of them. 2 women from El Salvador. A man from Nigeria who had been an accountant back home and was now working at a grocery store. A teenage girl from China who was quiet but watched everything. A couple from Guatemala who held hands the whole class and kept translating for each other under their breath. A man from Haiti who had been in the country for 10 years but had never had formal English classes. And a woman from the Philippines named Rosa, who turned out to be the funniest person in the room. I introduced myself. I told them my name was Emma. I told them what we were going to do over the next 12 weeks. And then I said something that I meant. This room is a safe space. Safe space means a place where you don't have to worry about being judged. If you make a mistake, good. That means you're trying. Mistakes are how we learn. I make mistakes too. We're all in this together. Rosa raised her hand. "Teacher," she said, "if you make a mistake, we will correct you, okay?" And then she smiled this big, bright smile. The whole room laughed. And just like that, the nervousness in the air broke. That first class was messy. I explained something and 2 people understood and 3 people looked confused. I tried an activity and it didn't work the way I planned. I used a word that was too complicated and had to stop and think of a simpler one. But we got through it. And at the end, people were talking in English, using words they hadn't known 90 minutes ago. James, the man from Nigeria, the accountant, stayed after class. He said, "I just want to say I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Thank you for being here." I drove home and I sat in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes before going upstairs. I thought, this is it. This is the thing. I want to be honest with you. There were some really hard weeks. About 6 weeks in, James stopped coming to class. He had been one of the most engaged students. Engaged means actively involved, really paying attention and participating. He never missed a question. He asked so many good questions that sometimes we'd spend extra time just talking about something he brought up. And then he wasn't there 1 week, and then the next week, and the week after that. I sent him a message. He replied 3 days later. He said he was working double shifts at his job. Double shifts means working twice as many hours as usual. because his family was going through a hard time financially. He was exhausted. He felt bad about missing class. And he wrote, "I feel like I'm letting you down." I read that, and my heart just hurt. I wrote back, "James, you are not letting me down. You could never let me down. Take care of your family. Take care of yourself. The class will be here when you're ready to come back, and I'll be here." He came back 4 weeks later. He walked in, sat down, opened his notebook, and looked at me. He said, "Okay, I'm back. Let's go." The class applauded. Applauded means they clapped their hands to show they were happy. Rosa started it, and everyone else joined in. James looked a little embarrassed, and then he laughed. And then he pulled out his pen and got to work. That moment stays with me. There was another hard thing happening around the same time. Money. My savings were running out. Running out means almost finished, almost gone. Teaching at the community center was meaningful, but it didn't pay much. I picked up some extra hours tutoring privately, one-on-one sessions with students who wanted extra help. That helped, but it was tight. Tight means just barely enough, not a lot of room. There were nights I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook and my bills, and I thought, maybe I made the wrong call. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should look for something more stable. And then I'd go to class the next evening, and the teenage girl from China, her name was May, would share something she'd written for homework. And it would be beautiful, careful and real, and just a little brave. And I would think, no, this is right. This is exactly right. Here's something they don't tell you about teaching. Your students teach you just as much as you teach them, maybe more. Rosa, the funny one from the Philippines, she taught me not to take myself too seriously. Every week she found something to laugh about. She mispronounced a word and laughed at herself. She got something wrong on an exercise and said, "Oh well, next week." She had this lightness about her, this ability to let things go, that I honestly admired. Admired means you looked up to it, you respected it, and wished you had it too. She taught me that learning can be joyful. It doesn't have to be tense and serious all the time. You can get something wrong and laugh and keep going. May, the quiet one, taught me about depth. She rarely spoke in class. She would listen very carefully, write everything down, and then her written work would be this thoughtful, detailed, beautiful thing. She understood more than she let on. More than she let on means more than she showed, more than she made obvious. I started giving her more wait time when I asked her questions. Instead of moving on when she didn't answer right away, I'd wait. And after a few seconds, she'd answer. And it was always worth waiting for. She taught me that silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes silence is someone thinking carefully. And James taught me about perseverance. Perseverance means continuing to try even when things are hard. He had been an accountant. He had a university degree. He was smart and capable. But in this country, without the language, none of that was visible. He had to start over in a way that most people will never understand. And he showed up. Every week, he showed up. Even when he was tired, even when it was hard. He showed up and he worked. One day after class, he told me he had a job interview at a small accounting firm. Not a big company, a small one, but a real one. In his field. He had gotten the interview because of his English. I told him to let me know how it went. He texted me that evening. I got it. 3 words. I read them about 15 times. Around month 8, I hit a wall. Hit a wall is an expression. It means you've been going, and then suddenly you feel like you can't go anymore. Like you've run into something solid and you just stop. I was tired. The money stress was still there. I had been going back and forth on whether to take a part-time office job just to make things more stable. And one week, I had a class that just didn't go well. Nothing clicked. Nobody seemed engaged. I gave an explanation and saw blank faces. Blank faces means no expression, not understanding, not connecting. I tried a different approach, still blank. I went home and I sat on my couch and I thought, I'm not good enough at this. That's a really specific kind of awful feeling, not just feeling tired or frustrated, but that particular thought, I'm not good enough. Like the problem isn't the situation. The problem is you. I called my best friend, Layla. She listened to the whole thing. When I was done, she said, Emma, you're in month 8 of something you've never done before, and you expect to be perfect at it? I didn't say anything. She said, you had one bad class. That's not a pattern. That's a Tuesday. I laughed. I didn't want to, but I did. She said something else that I needed to hear. She said, you're comparing yourself to the teacher you want to be someday, instead of looking at how far you've come from where you started. I thought about that. I thought about the first day of the program, when I could barely explain a lesson plan. I thought about my first class when I used the word exacerbate by accident because I forgot to check myself. I thought about how many times I'd revised a lesson after it didn't work and tried it differently the next week. I had gotten so much better. I just hadn't noticed because I was always looking ahead, not back. I got off the couch, I made tea, I opened my notebook, and I started planning next week's class. Something started to shift. By month 10, things were different. The classes felt easier, not because the work was easier, but because I was more comfortable. I knew my students. I knew how Rosa learned, and how May learned, and how James learned. I could read the room. Read the room means understand what's happening in a group, pick up on how people are feeling, and adjust. I started a second class on Thursday evenings with a different group of students, and a woman named Patricia, who ran a nonprofit that worked with immigrants and refugees, reached out to me. She had heard about my work from one of my students. She said, we've been looking for someone to design an English program for people who just arrived. Not classroom English, life English. The kind that helps you go to the doctor, talk to your kid's teacher, get your driver's license. Life English. I love that phrase. English that helps you live. We met at a coffee shop near her office. She was warm and direct. I liked her immediately. We talked for 2 hours. I told her what I'd learned about teaching adults. She told me about the people her organization served, about the barriers they face every single day just because of language. I said yes. Building that program took everything I had. I spent weeks designing it, thinking about what these particular people needed, what situations they'd actually face, what words and phrases would make the biggest difference in their daily lives. I wrote lessons about making a doctor's appointment on the phone, about talking to a landlord, about understanding a pay stub. A pay stub is the document you get with your paycheck that shows how much you earned and how much was taken out for taxes. The first session of the program was on a Monday morning in April. 21 people, all newly arrived, from different countries, different backgrounds, different ages. I stood at the front of that room and I looked out at all those faces. I said, "My name is Emma. We're going to learn some English together. And I promise you, you are more capable than you think you are. All of you." Okay, so let me take you back to where this started. It's been just over a year since I got that text from my boss. "Can you come in early? I want to chat." I went back to the bench by the river last week. Same bench where I sat the day everything fell apart. I had coffee in a paper cup and my green notebook, the same one, almost full now. It was a warm morning, a Saturday. A dad was riding a bike with his little girl, her training wheels clicking on the path. 2 dogs were playing in the grass. The ducks were there, same as always, doing their duck thing. I sat down and I just kind of took stock. Took stock means to stop and look at where things are, to assess your situation honestly. Here's where things are. I'm teaching 4 groups a week, 2 at the community center, 1 through Patricia's organization, and 1 private class that formed from students who finished my first 12-week course and wanted to keep going. I'm not rich. I want to be honest about that. But I'm doing okay. And more importantly, I look forward to Monday mornings. That's something I didn't have before. That specific thing. Looking forward to Monday mornings. I thought about all the people I'd met in this year. Rosa, who texted me last month to say she'd gotten a promotion at her job. James, who is now working full-time as an accountant and is helping his brother prepare for a job interview. May, who is going to apply to college in the spring. And so many others. I thought about Carol, the woman on the bench with the orange jacket. I never saw her again after that morning. But I think about what she said pretty often. Figure out what you actually want. Not what makes sense on paper, what you actually want. I had been so afraid of getting this wrong, of making a choice that didn't make sense, that people would question, that might not work out. And the fear almost stopped me. Almost. But here's what I know now. The fear doesn't go away. You don't wait until you're not scared. You just do the thing while you're scared. And then you do it again. And again. And somewhere along the way, so slowly you almost don't notice, it starts to feel like you. I want to end this story with something a little different. I want to talk to you directly, not as a storyteller, just as me, Emma. If you're learning English right now, really working at it, putting in the time, showing up to the hard lessons, I see you. That is not a small thing. That takes courage. Courage means doing something difficult even when you're afraid. You're probably at a point in your learning where you feel like you understand a lot, but you still don't sound the way you want to sound. Where you can read and listen pretty well, but speaking feels different, harder. That gap between understanding and speaking is real, and the only way through it is exactly what you're doing right now, listening to real English, a lot of it, and shadowing, repeating, getting the sounds and the rhythms into your body, not just your brain. So here's what I want you to do with this episode. Listen to it again. Not all of it. Pick one part that you connected with. Maybe it was the bench by the river. Maybe it was something Rosa did. Maybe it was what my friend Layla said on the phone. Pick that part and shadow it, sentence by sentence, until it feels natural. Until you're not thinking about the words anymore. Until you're just saying them. That's the goal. Not perfect pronunciation, not sounding like a native speaker, just ease, flow, language that comes out without a fight. You're building that. Every time you listen, every time you shadow, every time you show up. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to go back to a few moments from the story. You've already heard these sentences once. You heard them inside the story with all the emotion and context around them. And that's actually the best way to shadow, when you already know what the words mean, or you've already felt them. So now I'm going to read them again, one by one. After each one, I'll pause. That's your moment. Say it out loud. Copy my voice, my rhythm, the way the sentence moves. Don't think about it too much. Just follow me. First one. I finished my coffee, grabbed my bag, and headed to work. I finished my coffee, grabbed my bag, and headed to work. Notice those three actions: finished, grabbed, headed. Short and connected. That's how we talk in American English when things are moving fast. We don't say, I finished my coffee, and then I grabbed my bag, and then I headed to work. We just flow, finished, grabbed, headed. Try it again if you want. Second one, the water was moving slowly. A couple of ducks were drifting along, not going anywhere in particular, just floating. The water was moving slowly. A couple of ducks were drifting along, not going anywhere in particular, just floating. Slow this one down when you shadow it. The sentence itself is slow. It matches the feeling of the river. Let just floating land softly at the end. Third one. Figure out what you actually want, not what makes sense on paper. What you actually want. Figure out what you actually want, not what makes sense on paper, what you actually want. Notice how what you actually want comes back at the end. It repeats on purpose, for emphasis. When you shadow this, let your voice go a little lower and slower on that last line, like you really mean it. Fourth one, there's a big difference between knowing something and being able to teach it. Knowing something means it's in your head. Teaching it means you can take it out of your head and put it into someone else's head in a way they understand. There's a big difference between knowing something and being able to teach it. Knowing something means it's in your head. Teaching it means you can take it out of your head and put it into someone else's head in a way they understand. This one is longer. Don't rush it. If you need to, break it in half. Shadow the first sentence alone, then the second and third together. The contrast between knowing and teaching is the heart of it. Make sure that contrast comes through in your voice. Fifth one. You're comparing yourself to the teacher you want to be someday, instead of looking at how far you've come from where you started. You're comparing yourself to the teacher you want to be someday, instead of looking at how far you've come from where you started. I want you to really sit with this one, because if you're learning English right now, this sentence is also for you. You're not where you want to be yet, But you are not where you started either. Shadow it like you believe it. And the last one, this is the one I want you to carry with you. The fear doesn't go away. You don't wait until you're not scared. You just do the thing while you're scared. And then you do it again and again. The fear doesn't go away. You don't wait until you're not scared. You just do the thing while you're scared. And then you do it again and again. One more time. Without looking if you can. Just from memory. Good. That one's yours now. That's our episode for today. The year everything changed. My story, and in a lot of ways, I hope, yours too. Because even if the details are different, that feeling as being in between, of not being sure what comes next, of being scared but trying anyway, that's universal. That belongs to all of us. If this episode was useful to you, please share it with someone who's working on their English. Word of mouth is genuinely how this channel grows. And I'm grateful for every single person who does that. Come find me wherever you listen. New episodes drop every week. And I read every comment, so if you want to tell me which part of the story you're going to shadow first, leave a comment. I genuinely want to know. Take care of yourselves. Keep listening. Keep shadowing. Keep going. I'm Emma. This is Speak English Daily, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.